All right, our final main speaker is John Kraljevich, who comes all the way in from York County. He is the chair of the York County Democratic Party. He's the guy on the right-hand side of that photo, in case you need me to point that out. John accepted my invitation to come down. So John, let's take these two chairs and just pull them up front. I've been an admirer of John's from afar. He probably doesn't know it. But I've admired his work, what he's done with the York County Democrats. I admire the fact that he ran for State House in 2018, and he's done a lot of interesting things. He even has an interesting career whose name I cannot pronounce. So he's going to talk about what that career is. So I'm going to have just a quick Q&A with John. So John, I'm going to give you this microphone. Amanda, can you check the camera to make sure we're both in frame?
Awesome. Thanks, sir.
Careful not to knock over the process. Slow, you good?
Yeah.
Pull your chair a little bit.
Yeah. I've never been accused of being quiet or shy, so hopefully everybody can hear me with this microphone on. We good? All right.
Great. All right, John, so if you would start off just by introducing yourself, a little bit of background, what makes you interesting?
Oh gosh, interesting. Don't put that on me. So my name is John Kralovich. I live in York County, which, as y'all know, is right outside of Charlotte. I live in an area called Fort Mills, South Carolina. I've been here about a decade, like my cohort here in the blue shirt, jeans, and beard club. I am a former New Yorker. I actually grew up in the country in Pennsylvania, in the part of the state we call Pennsyltucky, and came down here when my wife said, either you're moving down here or we're done, because I am not moving to New York City. So here I am. My career, I'm a numismatist. I am a full-time dealer, authenticator, and writer about rare coins and history. I primarily write about history most of my days. And of course spent a lot of time working on politics as well. I've been involved in the York County Party for pretty much the whole time I've been in South Carolina. I've been the chair for just as long as Bill has, for just over a year now.
That's fantastic. Where in New York were you?
I was on the Upper East Side.
New York City, or
yes.
Oh, I thought you were in the country.
No. I lived in New York City for about 7 years. I lived on 2nd Avenue on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
All right. Well, we won't hold that against you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I
wasn't born there.
I'm a former upstate New Yorker.
All right. I won't hold that against you either. Yes. That's fine.
All right. So you, not only did you become chair, I want to go back a little bit further and talk about your running for office.
Yes.
See, that's high in my mind in trying to encourage people. I see Michael Gaskin here, and he's thrown his hat in the ring a couple of times, and it takes a lot of bravery to do so. Talk about your candidacy for House. What made you decide to take that leap? What experience did you have? What was that thought process, and how would you encourage others maybe to take that same leap?
Sure. It was the best experience of my political career, I'll put it that way. There's nothing like getting to know your neighbors by showing up at their doors and saying, you've heard from everybody else, you've seen things in your mail, you've heard radio or TV ads, you've read stuff in the paper. Here I am. I'm on your doorstep. I'm sweaty. You got questions? Ask me. I'm here. I knocked on 10,000 doors over the course of several months leading up to the election of 2018. Fortunately, I worked for myself, so I didn't have a boss to tell me to get back to work. So most days I took off work and knocked on doors. The reason I ran for office was that I saw that our elected official, Republican representative who had been there since the district had come in the last round of redistricting in 2010. We're a very, very high growth area, and she has always appealed to sort of the realtor, chamber of commerce kind of community and not the residents. The most dangerous place in York County is between her and a microphone. She's always there to, be at a halftime presentation or hand out a certificate, but in terms of actual legislating, had never done anything, isn't particularly good at her job, isn't particularly cognizant of the issues facing the community. So I ran a real campaign. We spent $100,000. We raised a lot of money. We had a big army of volunteers. It was the biggest campaign that part of York County had ever seen. We still got our butts kicked, but that is what it is. We outperformed previous presidential candidates. We outperformed every other previous Democrat who had run in the area. And what I would say is the best way to be competitive in a district that has trended traditionally Republican, it's twofold. depend less upon partisan issues and actually talk to real community issues. I mean, in our area, it's high growth. It's not a Republican or a Democratic thing. It's a thing that everybody has in common. Seeing a lot of people move into the area and infrastructure and policy not keep up. And the other thing is to make yourself available. Money can only go so far. But it's awfully hard to look at somebody on your doorstep standing there asking for your vote and see horns or see Joe Biden or see the National Democratic Party. You can't caricature me as, some kind of, weird out-of-state Democrat when I'm standing right there and we're talking about the fact that our kids are in the same high school band, or the fact that I live on your street, or this sort of thing. So there's always common ground to be found, and it's almost never with these sort of national partisan issues, which takes some real work getting to know the community and getting to know that network. And if you have that network, and if you've been in this community, I wasn't blessed enough to be born here. People look at my last name and say, that's not a Fort Mill name. I've heard that more than once. If you're from an area and you know that community, you have every bit as good a chance of winning in a seat as anybody else does. And if you can raise money, and if you can inspire volunteers to work for you, you're golden. Then it's just a matter of getting out there and doing the work and putting it in. So anybody that is considering running for office, first, it's a great way to get to know your neighbors and your town better. Second, it's a great way to serve Democrats and to give Democrats in your area a chance to vote for someone they can believe in and that they think can have a real chance to win. Give them that choice. And third of all, you might actually accidentally get yourself elected. And needless to say, the best way to help your community is get yourself elected. Now, campaigning and governing are two different skill sets. Republicans are only good at one of those things. They're kind of terrible at the governing thing. Democrats concentrate on governing, but unfortunately you can't govern. You can't make or change policy until you've gotten yourself elected first. So if there are things you see that need fixing in the government, in order to make those changes and own those policies, you've got to master the skill set of governing, of campaigning first. So you're fortunate enough to have an organized party here. You're fortunate enough to have a base of support here. And if you can get out there and actually do the campaigning work, you might see positive changes come from.
Now, I do want to correct something you said earlier. You talked about when you ran, you got your butt kicked. But I looked on Ballotpedia at your district, and I saw the elections prior and the elections since. You're the one that came closest.
That's right.
You had the best turnout, so I would not say, I'd say it was a great success. And at the end of the day, when I show up to cast a vote, damn it, I just want a choice.
Yep.
I don't want to see just the Republican name for a given spot. I want to have somebody else's name I can choose from. I'm not a straight party ticket voter, which is probably not the thing a party chair should say. But it always happens to turn out, I agree with the candidates down the ballot for the most part. But I like to know the person, and I want there to be a person to choose from. I don't like conceding a seat and then letting a lazy opposition win. Your party did something over the summer that only 2 other counties did, and that was participate in a pilot program from the state called Register 46. 46 standing for the 46 counties of South Carolina. Can you talk about that process? And then kind of, if you thought it was effective, they're beginning to roll it out statewide now.
Yep. So we were one of the part of the pilot counties, as Bill said, York County, Sumter County, and Greenville County, and they mixed it up to kind of get different geographic areas, different demographics. Greenville, they wanted to do someplace that was relatively urban. Sumter, they wanted to do someplace that was relatively rural or small town. And then York County, they kind of wanted to see how it worked in suburbs and high growth areas. And the way this was promoted to us from the state party is we've got this data that says there are tens of thousands of unregistered, likely Democratic voters, and you're going to go capture them all. I was dubious. I've been around the county a bit. I know a lot of the people. I know the neighborhoods. Are there unregistered voters? Sure. As states go, our state registration numbers in South Carolina are actually pretty good. And when we have done our voter registration work, because we're Democrats and when you go into primarily white or suburban areas, it's not primarily Democrats, we've always focused on African American communities in York County. Rock Hill is the 5th biggest city in the state. Rock Hill is an interesting case study. South Rock Hill is almost entirely African American. The rest of the city is predominantly white. And oddly enough, and this doesn't have to do with racial divisions, Main Street divides Rock Hill in half. The street north of Main Street is White Street. The street south of Main Street is Black Street. And that's kind of the way Rock Hill is. We've always focused on the south side of Rock Hill because when you register voters, you want to make sure you're registering your voters. If you're out there and you're sitting in front of a Dollar General and you get 5 people to register to vote for them are Republicans, not only have you wasted your time, you've actually cost yourself votes. So we're not trying to pursue everybody. Should everybody vote? Sure, great. It's America, go ahead and vote. We're trying to get Democrats elected here, right? That's why we're here. So we've always focused on likely Democratic areas. What the Register 46 thing said to us is that there are likely Democrats everywhere. Great news, show us. So they showed us the data. And this data comes not from Vote Builder, not from the registered voter rolls. Of course, we want the people who are external to the voter registration system and to the registered voter rolls. And the way they get that data is primarily through commercial outfits that can look at consumer data and say, look, if we've got a white lady with a master's degree who goes to yoga, she's probably a Democrat. Okay, fine. So they gave us this data, and we worked our way through it. As we knocked these doors, and I went out and knocked quite a bit alongside of our other volunteers and alongside of the organizer, the state paid, knocking on doors. That's my ex-wife. I divorced her 13 years ago. I don't know where she lives now. Okay. That's my adult child. They live in Florida. Their name is on the mortgage here, but they've never lived here. All right. No, that's the person I bought the house from. They moved out of state. All right. I don't know who that person is that you're looking for. Okay. We didn't register a lot of voters. What we found is that the data we got, and that's one reason we were a pilot project, is to see how the data was and to basically be guinea pigs. We found that most of the likely Democratic voters who were unregistered didn't exist, is what we found. What we found is that what we have been doing for years by concentrating on the high-density likely Democratic neighborhoods, that's where the voters were coming from. So what the lesson is to me is that when folks come from outside of your county and tell you how to run the county's business, odds are you're probably doing it right already. The best day we had in our voter registration efforts, we had our first ever Pride Festival in York County, in Rock Hill. Rock Hill's a college town, Winthrop University's there. We've always had a strong arts community. There's a strong LGBT community there. When we had our first Pride Festival, we registered 25 people in a single day. Now, there aren't many events in York County or anywhere in South Carolina where you get a big, dense crowd that is primarily left-leaning and young. I mean, you go to the state fair, or you go to a tractor pull or something like that, you're not primarily getting a whole lot of young Democrats. That was our best day. So what we have found in terms of voter registration is that knocking on random doors, looking for people that are on this likely unregistered Democratic voter list that are mostly not there, hasn't been greatly successful outside of traditionally Democratic areas. And that those big events, if you can get to a big event where you're in the African American community, or if you have a Latin community, we happen not to have a big Latin community in your county, or you're getting around college kids, those events are your best events for voter registration. But going door to door at a bunch of McMansions, or people just moved here from New York and New Jersey looking for people that never lived there, maybe not so effective. And I think that's what they found.
I appreciate that brutal honesty. Sometimes you hear people rah of a project, but you're not sure if it's real. One, I appreciate the state party trying this out, making the effort. We've got this data, we don't know if it's good, let's test it out.
Yep.
And then you stepped up, you actually took it seriously, you made the effort, you found the results, they weren't what we expected or hoped for. And that's fine too, you never know until you try.
That's right.
And the fact that it confirmed that what you were doing worked, that's great. That's some great insight. It helps us characterize what we're going to do going forward.
Yes.
The last topic I wanted to talk about here before we open it up to the group was a highly publicized incident that occurred in York County involving a police brutality incident. And I know I don't think you were in the center of it, but you were part of the response effort. Can you talk a little bit about what transpired there?
Sure. So we had an occasion in Rock Hill where two brothers, the Price brothers, Ricky and Travis Price. Ricky Price was pulled over by a joint task force where there was federal agents involved doing drug interdiction. He'd had some past experience with law enforcement and basically got himself on a list of likely drug dealers. And he got pulled over for changing lanes without a turn signal, hauled out of his car search, all that sort of thing. During the arrest, he asked the arresting officers if his brother could come and take his jewelry from him. The arresting officer said that's fine. His brother showed up. One of the officers who was there, who apparently hadn't gotten that communication, took his brother Travis threw him on the ground, manhandled him. There was a video from a bystander. Fortunately, A, had the guts to be there to witness the stop, and B, had the guts to actually record it. Thank God for cell phones. It makes you wonder how much police brutality there was before the age of cell phones. We probably don't have to wonder. And it was a highly publicized incident. It was violent, it was aggressive, it was nasty, and it provoked an absolute immediate response from people. Now, fortunately, again, part of the job that we do is not just the day-to-day organizing of a party and making sure that we've got sufficient orange juice for a meeting. It's being in the community, it's networking, it's knowing who your community leaders are. And one of our community leaders, a woman named Timor, came to me within an hour of it happening and said, John, there's this video. It's going to upset you. We've got to get it out. And I said, look, our channels, we've got 2,000 people in our Facebook group. We've got 2,000 people on our mailing list. Our channels are yours. Part of leadership, especially being a leader in a diverse coalition like the Democratic Party, sometimes being a leader is knowing when to let other people lead and just supporting them. And as a white guy with a funny name, this wasn't my fight to lead when there are people in the community fighting for civil rights, fighting for equal treatment from the police, and are doing that work every single day. So I thought our job as a party was not to grandstand, but it was to offer our organized infrastructure to the folks on the ground doing this work every single day. We supported the local NAACP, who's been very active on this topic. They've pioneered the introduction of a Citizens Review Board in Rock Hill, which is just getting underway as all this stuff happens. So within hours of this video getting out, we had put it on all our channels. We supported a local group called Moms Against Racism in getting their word out. They had put out essentially a list of demands of the city government and of the city police that we thought was absolutely spot on. It was correct. It introduced to a larger audience the ideals of the Democratic Party in terms of equality and in terms of a citizens-based government. We supported those goals. We didn't brand them with our name. We supported them. We helped get them out there in those channels. We used our volunteer base to show up at the rallies that followed, to interface with the city government, to interface with the police department. We were there to talk about the political side of this kind of advocacy that works in parallel and complementary to actually taking the streets when this sort of thing happens. We were fortunate in the Price Brothers incident that no one was killed, no one was severely injured, and through the advocacy of Moms Against Racism, of the local NAACP and some other community groups, the officer that was so aggressive was actually arrested and charged with assault, which almost never happens. And it was through this constant application of pressure from people who had been in that community for years, from people in the Democratic Party, back channel calling the mayor, front channel jumping in front of TV cameras, doing things the right way with peaceful, organized protests in the nonviolent fashion that we've all become accustomed to. And there was some violence that happened after hours. Unfortunately, they set a patch of mulch on fire. I mean, literally like a 3-square-foot patch of mulch. And that was what was on the national right-wing news. They're setting fire to the police station in Rock Hill. Mulch. But we worked together with these community groups. We let them lead, and insofar as we did that, we were able to lift up leaders to a position where their brilliance, where their hard work could be elevated to a much larger audience. Now, selfishly, what I'm thinking here is, that Rahm Emanuel, who used to work for Barack Obama, said, never let a catastrophe go to waste. When I saw these community leaders step into the spotlight and shine, and show how good they were in the arena, in a very anxiety-inducing incident like this, something that was really upsetting to a lot of people. What I saw future candidates, I saw future leaders of our party, and there's an old saying my dad used to say that if you want to make a friend, ask somebody for a favor. I saw a lot of people that I could ask of favors, and it helped broaden the reach of the Democratic Party for those folks in the community who were political but in a different way, political in a non-electoral way, know that Democrats had their back, supported them, and let them shine in the way that they were intended to be. So it was a good community building exercise. We made something good out of it. We got a violent police officer off the streets. He's no longer working in Rock Hill. Hopefully he'll never be a police officer ever again. The charges were dropped against one of the brothers. They were reduced against the brother who was originally arrested. The city handled it well. There was a complete investigation that took 11 days to complete. And I attribute that speed to the pressure that was applied by this community activist that we helped lift up.
Well, thank you, John. That was a very riveting accounting of a real-world incident where the Democratic Party played a part in facilitating a positive outcome. And you know what? We're not just about calling out police when something goes wrong. We also need to be there to support our officers. The 99% of the time, things are going well. I mean, I know Bishop McCrae and the Morris Chapel Baptist Church has been a great supporter of the local police community, hosting forums here in this very same room, and we support that. So we need to be there for our police officers to establish the credibility that when accountability is needed, because the police have the powers, they've got the weaponry, they've got just the power of the badge behind them, so that when an officer does exceed their authority, then swift justice needs to be had. And so I thank you for that story. That was absolutely riveting.
Sure.
Do we have any questions for our guest here today? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I probably for the last decade or so I've run a polling station here in Greenwood. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is there's a lot of straight party voting, which you mentioned before. If it's straight party and it's in a Republican area, they're not going to get to you. They're going to vote for Republican up here and you're down the bottom. How do you overcome it? You can also notice that the percentage of straight party was greater on the Republican side than on the Democrat side. Now, we didn't have any Democrats voting in my district, but that's okay. How do you overcome that straight ticket vote?
So the question is, for those that weren't able to hear, it's about straight ticket balloting and straight ticket voting, and how can a Democratic candidate overcome that?
It's damn near impossible. That's the short answer. So, longer answer. In my election in 2018, roughly 57% of the votes that were cast came from people voting straight ticket. Now, elections are all about drawing contrasts, right? I'm better than this other person, I'm smarter, I'm better looking, whatever contrast you can draw. Now, when you're running against a little-known elected official, it's very hard to draw a contrast because they have to know who you're running against, right? It's real easy in presidential level, congressional level, everybody knows who everybody's running against. I was running against a woman named Ray. And I'd show up on somebody's front door and say, you know, what is Ray Felder? I don't know what he's done for me, but he's a Republican and I'm going to vote for him. They literally don't even know who their representatives are. They're just voting straight ticket. Now, to your point about the more Republicans do it than we do it. So 57% of the votes cast were straight ticket votes. That was roughly 2/3 of Republicans and 1/3 of Democrats. Now, that doesn't mean that Democrats don't go down and tick every Democratic box. It just means they don't press that one button that says hit all the D's and I'm out of here. Now, the problem is who makes those rules about state ticket voting being allowed? There's like 9 states in the country that allow straight ticket voting. Unfortunately, we're so gerrymandered here that the folks making those rules, our elected officials, the Democrats want straight ticket voting as much as the Republicans do, because the Democrats who are elected are largely from majority Democratic districts, and it's so much easier for them in election time that someone can just go in and punch a D, rather than them having to do the hard work and heavy lifting of actually campaigning so that people know to vote for their name and not the letter after their name. So we have a real problem with our elected officials, all of whom love straight ticket voting because it helps all of them, Republican and Democrat. Now, overcoming that is what you asked. How do you overcome that as a candidate and have people split their ticket, essentially? Now, I would walk into somebody's living room and sit down, and I'd talk about small business, I'd talk about infrastructure, and I'd be sitting here in my starch blue shirt looking all white. They'd figure I was a Republican, because I wasn't talking about Democratic issues in Fort Mill, South Carolina. I was just talking about, stuff that I thought mattered to the community. I guarantee you there was people whose houses I walked out of that thought, that young man must be a Republican. He sounds like he's sensible. Then they'd get into the ballot box, and they'd vote for my opponent. Now, the way you overcome that, the way you message to your name rather than your party, is with money. And I hate to put it that way. Mother's milk of politics, you've all heard that? Yep. Now, if you're sending out mailers, doing digital advertising, or radio or TV or whatever you're doing, you're leading with your name rather than your party, right? The only way to overcome that party identification, have people split tickets, is to find issues that draw a contrast with your opponent, that are relatively nonpartisan. Nobody's getting elected in Fort Mill, South Carolina talking about the Green New Deal. It's just not going to happen. And then having sufficient money to message and say, that issue that you agree with me on, this is my name, vote for me. And that takes a lot of money. And that means it takes a lot of effort calling people and say, you don't know me, but I think I'm worth $100 out of your wallet. That stinks. That is no fun at all. Calling strangers and asking them for money, are you kidding? That's terrible. But it's the only way to get Democrats elected and to overcome what you're talking about and actually get people to split their tickets.
All right, listen, we have time maybe for one more question, and then we need to wrap up our meeting for today. Anybody else have a question to ask? Brenda.
Yes, I've been having Zoom meetings with the great excuse me, but we have agreed that candidacy needs to start now and become a regular activity for the party. Melanie Nolan is the representative for Abbeville, Aikens, and Louis. So far, when we first started, we only had 15, so we had 69 sign-ups so far. And 20 shifts, complete shifts. That was the ones going out in canvassing. So we're going to start canvassing today at 1 o'clock.
So to summarize, Ms. Brenda, she's the chair of the Abbeville County Democrats, and they are extraordinarily active in the voter registration drives, far more than we are here in Greenwood. And we look up to you for that great effort. Did you have a question for our speaker?
Yes, I was going to ask about the same thing about the ticket. I just want to make a comment. I was voter registration director for 30 years, and I found out that when people go, and they're going to make sure they vote a straight ticket, especially if they're a Democrat, especially if they're an older, black person, they're going to vote Democrat if they have to go down and check the name and everything. But in Abbeville County, we're going to turn Abbeville County blue. Is that right, ma'am?
I like that. Yes, ma'am.
We're going to turn Abbeville County blue. I took 216 young people to the polls, or elderly to the polls, and I made sure they went in to vote. I carried them in 3 different vehicles. They have a large family. I go back and get my truck or my van. And I took kids. I babysitted while the parents going there. So I think we need to make an effort to focus on these young people. But the elderly, they're going to go out and vote.
That's right. Yes, ma'am.
The younger people is what we have to focus on. And getting them out to vote.
So here in Greenwood, before you leave today, I would ask that all of you take a moment to fill out a volunteer form, put your name down, volunteer to work a voter registration shift, maybe canvass one day, or maybe make some calls. Get active. Get active, and you can make a change. John, I thank you for your time.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a great surprise to have you down. Appreciate you traveling.
One more question.
One last one.
Yes, sir.
What can be done to get the apathetic Democratic voters to vote? Because that's the largest number of people that don't vote.
That's right.
Not to be able to do that.
Well,
What can spark them to want to vote, period?
I think that is the ultimate question about the success of the Democratic Party in states like South Carolina. And I will tell you what I've done as chair in York County to try to increase numbers of African American turnout. Now, all turnout. So, the biggest Democratic precinct in York County is a place called Edgewood. That's the biggest precinct in the whole county. And it's predominantly African American precinct. They vote at about an 85% clip. So I hear lots of complaints, mostly from white people in York County, that we need to get the African American community out to vote. African Americans vote. I don't ever want to hear that complaint ever again. The church community, the value of the vote, the experience that ancestors fought and died from the day the 15th Amendment was passed till today for the vote, has given the African American community a real tried and true desire to turn out the vote. So our problem, as someone else said, is with younger people, particularly younger white people, thinking, why me, why does it matter? And the way to get voter turnout to increase is to get people more involved in the party and feel like they're being listened to. An hour's worth of nodding and not saying a damn word is oftentimes a lot better than an hour worth of talking. As I sit here talking to you. And that goes for each and every one of us. Not just the chairs, but volunteers, knowing that you're a member of the Democratic Party and you are here to listen, whether it be at their high school clubs, or their college clubs, or at the Rotary, or at church, or wherever you find people that share our ideals. Whether they think they're Democrats or not, go out and listen to them. And as you listen, make sure that they know that it's not just Joe Biden they get to vote for. That a month from today, they get to vote in an election to choose town council, a mayor, where it might hinge on one vote. The mayor of Florence won by one vote. The mayor of Clover won by one vote. And I think when people realize that they can have a real voice in local elections, it will encourage them to vote every time they get a chance to. So that's what I would answer that question.